Welcome to Catholic Chicago. I'm Deacon Jim Norman, Vicar for Deacons with the Archdiocese of Chicago, and honored to serve at Our Lady of Sorrows Basilica on the west side of Chicago. This is the Black Catholic Initiative radio show where we share the experiences, perspectives, and insights of Black Catholics within the Archdiocese of Chicago and outside. We discuss what's happening, what and who is having an impact, and how we move forward in faith uniquely Catholic and uniquely Black. I'm delighted today to have with me Roxanne King, one of the co-authors of the new book, Catholic Heroes of Civil and Human Rights. Roxanne, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
Thank you for being here with us. It's a wonderful book. I had the opportunity to read a number of the profiles, especially of those that I wasn't familiar with. So I found that very interesting. We hope in our time together to give our audience a sense of the book, why it was written, what you hope them to take from it, and hopefully they'll go get a copy immediately and share copies with families and friends and their fellow parishioners. Let me start here. First, give us a little bit of your background and perhaps Matthew Daniels, who's your co-author. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm a journalist of 30 years. I was longtime editor of the Denver Catholic Register. I actually retired from full-time journalism about 10 years ago and began freelancing for Catholic media. In that time period, I was invited to write a book of Catholic Heroes of Civil and Human Rights by Matthew Daniels, who is an evangelical Christian and a professor of law, political science, and human rights. He owns a civil rights curriculum based on the gospel-based principles of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and he wanted a book of Catholic heroes that could be used as a supplement for Catholic high schoolers who would be using his curriculum. So that's how I got involved in the project. And I'm grateful to Matthew. It was a brilliant idea to present Catholic heroes as heroes of civil and human rights, which is what they are, although they were really motivated by love of God and love of neighbor. So that's how that's a little bit about me and a little bit about Matthew.
Okay. And then the intended audience initially were those in Catholic grade schools, high schools, colleges.
Yeah, Catholic high schools.
High schools.
But Ignatius Press became interested in the manuscript, and they asked that it be written for a general audience. So really, the book it's a standalone book, and the only connection to the curriculum, which you wouldn't be aware of if you read the book, because there's no mention of the curriculum, is that it is divided into 5 sections. It's organized around 5 natural law principles that are foundational to human rights. So freedom, perseverance, hope, justice, and conscience. And it features 16 profiles of Catholic heroes from diverse backgrounds, lay and religious, from college students to canonized saints, who courageously defended and advanced civil and human rights. So I hope that answered, Deacon.
So there's 16 of the Catholic heroes that are featured in the book.
There are 16 profiles, but 2 of them talk about 2 people.
Okay.
One, a lay couple, Pat and Paul Bokelich, who were very much involved in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Paul marched in the Selma to Montgomery, Alabama march that resulted in the Civil Rights Act, and he and his girlfriend at the time, but after that march, he married, and the couple, Paul and Pat, moved to the Deep South and were involved in voter registration drives in the Deep South, farm co-ops, campaigns, and did help to get the first Black sheriff in Utah, Greene County, Utah, Alabama elected, and that sheriff actually became very famous as the sheriff without a gun.
Okay.
But anyway, uh, someone like him, and then I don't remember what was the question again, Deacon.
I was just, it was a question about I think you were clarifying 16, but there was
Oh,
a couple that
yes,
you identified here as well, which does raise the
yes.
question, how many biographies, profiles did you actually review to get to this 16?
I had actually identified 35 heroes,
Okay.
and but my 16 profiles is what was feasible given my deadline.
Okay.
So that's how we ended up with 16. And I wanted to feature people whose stories were maybe not very well known. And because of the time frame of 1800s to the present that Matthew had wanted the book to cover, they're really very contemporary people, and three of them are still alive, as Paul Bokelich is, who I mentioned. His wife, Pat, passed. The other profile in the book that actually talks about two people is Dorothy Day and Peter Morin, the co-founders of the Catholic Worker newspaper and movement.
There is a wonderful quote on page 9. It's actually in the introduction by Dorothy Day. It says, she wondered where the saints were who would try to change the social order, not just
Yeah,
to minister to the slaves, but to do away with slavery itself. So it seems like in the profiling of these 16 heroes, they were seeking to change the social order in some way to bring those attributes you referenced earlier through service, freedom and charity and justice to others.
yes. So, so uh, you must forgive me. Can you repeat that again? I'm so sorry.
I, I was, did you, the quote from Dorothy Day that you
The
referenced in the
quote from
book?
Dorothy Day. Yes, so I was going to say about Dorothy Day. She had had a very radical youth and young adulthood, and she wrote for communist and socialist newspapers because she believed that they were offering a solution to the social ills of the day. It was during the time of the Great Depression, and she converted to Catholicism. And when she did so, she kind of struggled to find how to um, how to tie her work with her faith. She wanted to do more to really address social ills, not just write about them. And after she converted, she began writing for Catholic media, and she was covering a hunger march in Washington D.C. During the time of the Great Depression. She wrote her story. Her heart was really with the people who were the majority were not communists. They were simply people who wanted to work, and she went to the National Shrine in Washington D.C., the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception Shrine, and she prayed that God would show her a way to combine her work with her faith. And when she returned to New York City the next day, Peter Morin, a former Christian brother, had was waiting for her, and he had this vision of a society based on gospel values and Catholic social teaching. And Dorothy saw him as the answer to her prayer, and he saw her as the collaborator that really the Lord had sent to him. And together they did launch the Catholic Worker newspaper, which shared Catholic social teaching. And from that came houses of hospitality to feed and house people who were hungry, people who were homeless, as well as Catholic worker farms, where it was going to be easier for people to be good. And the Catholic Worker newspaper, which was sold and launched on May 1st, back during the time of the Great Depression, the 1930s, is still published today. It's still sold for a penny a copy,
Mm.
as it was when it was launched. And there are still houses of hospitality and Catholic worker farms in the US and around the globe.
I was going to ask a couple of questions. I actually read the profiles of those that I didn't know and that many Catholics may not have heard of. In that, knowing that you're a storyteller, if you would take a few moments, Cardinal Patrick O'Boyle, to share
Oh,
his
yeah.
story. I thought very
Yeah.
powerful. His story, his courage, he's identified in the freedom section of your book. But if you could just
Yes.
share his story briefly with our audience.
Yeah, so Cardinal O'Boyle was the first resident archbishop of Washington, D.C. And 5 years before the U.S. Supreme Court outlawed school segregation, Archbishop O'Boyle desegregated the Catholic schools and churches of Washington, D.C., and which was still under Jim Crow rule. He had a meeting with leaders, parish leaders, and he was sharing with them that he wanted to desegregate, and they were saying, it's going to take time, and it might even take 10 years. This was a huge change. Supreme Court hadn't outlawed it yet. And he said, "Well, gentlemen, we're going to do it tomorrow." And he was a champion of civil and social uh, civil rights. And social injustice. Of championing against that. He actually, when the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. gave his "I Have a Dream" speech,
Yes.
Cardinal O'Boyle gave the invocation to that event, and he uh, he was very much in favor of, like, the union workers, and advocating on their behalf for, uh, pay for uh, equitable pay for a day's work, those kinds of things. Yeah, he was uh, was just came from very humble Irish roots, and just had a heart really for laborers, and for any type of people who were being oppressed or persecuted. Spoke out in support of Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement, which was happening in the 1960s. So yeah, he was a beautiful hero who I had not been aware of either
Okay.
prior to researching for the book. Yeah.
I wanted to ask just a couple of more of the heroes you identified in the section 2 on perseverance. Tell us a little bit about Diane Nash. There's at one point she makes a very powerful response to someone who asked her to stop the work she's doing. But tell us more about her story.
So Diane Nash was from Chicago, and she went to school in Tennessee. She went to college, and that's really where she experienced really overt discrimination, and was just shocked at being treated like a second-class citizen by not being able to eat, like, at the lunch counter at Woolworths, and having segregated bathrooms. And she learned about the nonviolent social justice uh, principles of a Baptist minister who taught nonviolent resistance, which was very popular during the 1960s civil rights movement. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. advocated this very much. And so she led, like, Nashville students in peaceful protests. They were able to win desegregation in Nashville at lunch counters, which was a huge win for the civil rights movement at the time. Um, a, a colleague of hers had started the Freedom Rides, to draw attention to a discrimination on interstate travel in the bus system. And at a certain point, because of violence, the freedom rides had been stopped, and she rallied to get them started again. And at the time, the Attorney General Robert Kennedy's assistant called Diane Nash at the request of President Kennedy to stop her. And the Attorney General's assistant told Diane, young woman, don't you know you're going to get somebody killed? You can't resume these rides. And she said, sir, you should know we all signed our last wills and testaments last night before they left. We know someone will be killed, but we can't let violence overcome nonviolence. And that was really the spirit of the people involved in the 1960s civil rights movement. They were willing to give their lives for the cause of justice. And yeah, I too was not aware of Diane Nash until I did the research for the book. And she's very much alive and well in Chicago today.
Wow, wow. And I wanted to ask about one last profile. It was Defining Hope, Julia Greeley from Denver, I believe.
Yeah, she is one of six American Black Catholics whose causes for canonization are currently underway, as you're well familiar with, I'm sure. Julia, I have a special love for because she's Denver's servant of God. I'm from Denver. So Julia came to Denver probably around 40 years old. Just after slavery had ended, she came as a free woman from Missouri to work for Denver, Colorado's first territorial governor, William Gilpin, and his wife, who was also named Julia. Julia Gilpin was a very devout Catholic. Julia Greeley was much impressed by her Catholicism and became a convert to Catholicism herself at our Sacred Heart Church in downtown Denver. She had been blinded as a child by a slave master's whip. And yet she refused to hate. When she became Catholic, she undertook this mission of charity where she would collect things, buy things, be given things that she would distribute to the poor. And she was very poor herself. She had a very meager living. She was uneducated, and she would do house cleaning and childcare. So Julia would often distribute these goods under cover of night, especially if she was delivering to a white family that might be embarrassed to receive charity from a former slave. And she also had great devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And she would make a monthly pilgrimage on the first Saturday of every month to distribute prayer leaflets. She couldn't read them, but she knew that they encouraged prayer and dedicating one's day to the Lord. And she would give these to the firefighters. She would go to all 20 of Denver's fire stations and give these to the firefighters, whether they were Catholic or not, so that they could be prepared for death should they have an untimely death. There had been a terrible fire in the traditionally Black neighborhood in Denver, 5 Points, and all the firefighters had died.
Wow.
And so Julia would distribute these prayer leaflets. She called them tickets to heaven. And when she died, this was way before social media, and there was a little tiny one-sentence line in the Denver Post or Rocky Mountain News, one of those papers, a death notice about Julia. Hundreds of people turned out for hours for her visitation, and her body lay in state, if you will, at a small chapel in 5 Points. People from all walks of life, and people were calling for her canonization immediately. She was just much beloved, and people appreciated so much her shining Christian witness. The Denver Archdiocese did start her canonization cause a few years ago, and during that time, they exhumed her body from the local Catholic cemetery and entombed her at Denver's Cathedral Basilica of the Immaculate Conception downtown. She is the only person buried in the cathedral. No priests, no bishops, just Julia to
Wow.
the left of the altar under the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Wow. Wow. Powerful. Very powerful.
Yeah,
I was going to ask then, you mentioned Julia was from Denver, so are you. Um, are there others, is there one other of the 16 heroes that most impacted you, opened your perspective, gave you new insights?
yeah. Thank you, Deacon. Yes. So, Blackout, Nicholas Blackout. There's a very famous book written about Nicholas Blackout called Blackout Speaks. Very popular. It's such a popular book that he's one of the best known Native Americans in this country. However, the book only covers his youth and young adulthood. The author left out most of Black Elk's life story, and Black Elk had a very interesting life. He had hunted buffalo with his father in Montana and Canada. He had taken part in the Indian Wars. He had taken part in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and visited Europe. And there he was very much impressed with the great cathedrals and the piety of the worshipers in the great cathedrals, the Christian worshipers. And he converted to Catholicism in his 30s and became a Catholic catechist, which at the time very much did the work of a deacon that a deacon does today. He would catechize people. He would prepare them for sacraments. He would do baptisms. He would bury people. And he traveled to other tribes to share the good news of Wanakia, the Lakota name for Jesus, which means he who makes live.
Oh, wow.
And the Native Americans were a devastated people at the time, having been put on reservations. And he brought the hope and new life of Christ to them, was much beloved by his people for this ministry. And it was actually his grandchildren who asked that a canonization cause be started. And indeed, he is a servant of God. And I had not known about Black Elk's beautiful Catholic ministry until I did the research for the book, and I very much wanted other people to be aware of his story. He was responsible, I think, for 400 baptisms, and was godfather to like 100 people.
Wow.
So yeah, his is a beautiful story.
And you have an incredible title there, from medicine man to catechist,
Yeah,
is
he
how you
was a
describe
medicine
it.
man. Black Elk Speaks, I forgot to mention that. The book Black Elk Speaks is primarily telling the story of his childhood vision when he was 9, which led to his vocation as a spiritual healer for his people. And so initially he was a medicine man, but then he learned of Christ and brought Christ to his people.
Right.
So it's a beautiful story, Black Elk, and we can ask his intercession for us, that we too might realize our call to holiness as he and the other heroes in the book have done.
What are you hearing from those who've had the opportunity to read the book and read about the heroes? What are they saying to you? What are they saying in general? Bringing their learnings, their knowledge, their insights? What are you hearing?
Well, people have shared with me very much what you have, and what I had experienced in encountering these people that they didn't know. They didn't know these wonderful stories. Because they are very contemporary people, and we were most blessed to get a plethora of endorsements. Reverend Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles said, described the book as a timely reminder that our faith in Jesus calls us to serve our brothers and sisters in need, to care for the weak and vulnerable, and to struggle against threats to the dignity of human life. Archbishop Aquila of Denver said, may the rich diversity of these narratives empower readers with the courage to promote the truth about our fundamental identity as sons and daughters of God the Father. Archbishop Charles Chaput wrote, concise and eminently readable, a timely and invaluable invitation to join in the Christian task of sanctifying the world. And really that's the hope of the book, that all of these beautiful Catholic heroes were signs of what St. John wrote in the first chapter of his gospel. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. They bore witness that through an authentic Christian, light indeed shines in the darkness. And it's my hope for the book that they inspire readers to be the light in this world that God desires, and to realize their own call to holiness.
I think that's wonderful, along with the statements and the endorsements for the book. This notion of faith calls us to service. I think the 16 heroes, certainly a diversity of background and experiences, but that all move them to this greater call to service along conscience, justice, hope, perseverance, and freedom. And encouraging then each of us, as you said, to be a sanctifying force in the world, to bring light to the darkness.
Yes, they really transformed people's lives. They were all so different, and used their gifts and talents to address the needs that were right before them. And in doing so, they transformed people's lives, and they paved the way for a more equitable society. They helped to bring about the right order. And that's what we do when we share Christ's love. Love God and love our neighbor. So
you had mentioned that originally it was Matthew Daniels, who's actually evangelical, who said we need to do this and identify Catholic heroes. Was there, and share this with high school students, right?
Yes. Yes.
Did that come from a place saying, here's the current state, and I want to use this book to change the current state or current view?
Yes. So at the time, like 2020, 2021, we saw a lot of violence surrounding social justice movement at the time. And Matt really wanted to reclaim the gospel-based values of human rights. And that was the big difference between the 1960s civil rights movement and the calls for social justice that we've experienced in recent years. There was violence in the 1960s as well, but one side refused to engage in violence and used loving one's neighbor. Violence was willing to be suffered but not to be given, as Paul Bokelich said. Violence was willing to be suffered but not to be given. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had talked a lot about how unmerited suffering is redemptive. We see this in Christ's sacrifice, and it is. And the power of love, of Christian love, which did which did result in changing um, our society, our culture in many positive ways, and did result in laws that were passed. And yeah, so Matt really wanted to reclaim the gospel roots of human rights.
And so the thought of that reclaiming the gospel roots and the faith roots of human rights would
Yes.
hopefully inspire more to move forward in a more diligent a way and pursue kind of what our present day challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Um,
And
Go ahead.
yeah, and we've seen with like the Catholic Church, our pontiff has always been like a moral voice for the world, and we saw that very much. Well, very much with the two, I think, recent. That were just shining examples were St. John Paul II, in helping to bring uh, his support of the solidarity movement in Poland and helping to bring down the Iron Curtain. And we see with Pope Francis, who was really very much advocating always for the rights of people to migrate, to be able to provide for their families, and provide a safe environment for their families. And the Pope Francis, right before he became ill earlier this year, one of his last acts was to write to the U.S. bishops, encouraging them to continue to advocate for and assist immigrants who are seeking a better life, just want a better life for their families. I think the world does look to the Catholic Church, in the pontiff, as a moral voice for direction on issues that are plaguing our society. Yeah.
Does this book also call us as Catholics to be active um, in the face of injustice and indignities and social issues?
Um, yes, because we see these heroes doing what they can right before them. For example, Mother Mary Elizabeth Lang, who's venerable now, she came from Cuba and she spoke French, and she was in her community in Maryland. There were many uh, uh, other immigrants, refugees, and the children could not were having trouble learning their catechism, because they couldn't read or write. And she and a friend had actually run a school for black children for 10 years until they ran out of money. And then a new priest in town wanted he had heard about Mary Elizabeth Lang and her friend and their school, and he wanted them to start a school because he wanted the children to be able to read and write so that they could learn their catechism. And he actually wanted them also to form a religious order. There were no religious orders for black women, black Catholic women at the time. And Mother Mary Elizabeth Lang and her friend, it was an answer to prayer. For 10 years, they had wanted to be consecrated women, but no order would accept them. So the Oblate Sisters of Providence were founded to establish these schools. Mother Mary Elizabeth Lang started the first school for Black Catholic children in the U.S. That school is still functioning today in inner city Baltimore, serving inner city Catholic youths. And yeah, she had a gift and talent to be able to teach these children. She could do that. She did that, and the Lord made a way. Not only did she start this first school that's still functioning today, but this order that continues to function today. And it broke a barrier. There had been no orders for Black Catholic women, and this was the first one.
That's probably a great point as we begin to conclude for today, that the work that was begun by these Catholic heroes, many of them, is still alive and having an impact today. I think that's
Yes.
just a very powerful
Yes.
statement. And it gives us, maybe each of us, hope that the work we begin today will have an impact in the future on issues of justice and access and freedom for many, many others. You'd mentioned at the beginning that to get to these 16, there were 35 that were reviewed. Just a little bit of a ask as we begin to conclude, is there a possibility of a book 2?
Oh, I think that that's very much a possibility. Yes. I actually was very happy to be invited to pursue a book about a full-length biography on one of the heroes in the book.
Oh,
And I am considering Julia Greeley, because there is a wonderful book about Julia Greeley that is really just a compilation of everything that's known about her. But it's not like a narrative story. And so the author of that book, Capuchin Father Blaine Berkey, is a dear friend, and he's given me his blessing. The Julia Greeley Guild here in Denver, they too have felt like a biography is very much needed, and so yeah, that is something that I am needing to turn my attention to and hope to pursue.
oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, that's something for our audience to be on the lookout for, a biography on Julia Greeley,
yeah,
written by Roxanne King. And we're going to put up just again the book for the audience here so that they can see it and hopefully go and get their copy, Catholic Heroes of Civil and Human Rights from the 1800s to the present. An outstanding book, will bring a lot of information and insights and encourage us to be lights, just as these 16 Catholic heroes were. Roxanne, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for being with us. Thank you and Matthew both for your writing and your shedding light on these wonderful heroes of faith who had an impact on our lives and are having still today an impact on
absolutely.
our lives. Thank you again. God bless you.
God bless you, Deacon. Thank you very much.